Put that thing back where it came from. Oh, so help me.
I've somehow gone this long on this channel without ever diving into Monsters, Inc. and why I absolutely adore it. This movie just has it all. It's arguably the funniest Pixar movie ever made, giving us tons of great physical comedy moments and hilarious running jokes. It has some of the most iconic characters Pixar has ever made, from the main cast to the side peeps. If you showed me this picture, I would immediately recognize him as the 2319 guy. This movie's characters and running gags are burned into my brain because they're so great. And the dynamic between the main characters is even better. It's cool to get a movie for once where we don't have to focus on an unlikely duo learning to become friends. We could just start things off with their great dynamic and focus on the plot and world building instead. Mike and Sully are one of the best Pixar duos ever, and I appreciate the fact that their friendship gets tested in a believable way. Every kids movie seems to indulge themselves in that whole main characters split up before coming back together in the climax shtick, but Monsters Inc. is one of those movies where it feels earned. The scene where they split up really chokes me up to this day, and honestly, thinking back, this might have been the first time in my life when a movie ever made me feel sad. I must have been 3 or 4 at the time, but I can vaguely remember watching this scene and getting emotionally invested in something for the first time in my life. It's crazy to think about that. Anyway, speaking of usually overdone tropes that the movie earns, Waternoose is such a fantastic twist villain. Randall is intimidating and fun enough, but when you add on a second villain whose motivations line up and parallel real-world corrupt CEOs, that's some good shit. And the relationship between Sully and Boo is just the most wholesome thing in the whole universe. It's just perfectly paced. He grows to like her at the perfect time. He gives her a nickname at the perfect time. Their interactions are just so beautiful, and I wouldn't change a thing about them. Truth be told, I could go on for days about how great Monsters Inc. is. Everything comes together, from the humor to the world building to the villains to the score to the climax to that powerhouse of a final scene. If I had any complaints, it would probably be a bit of messiness with the story towards the middle, but otherwise, I can't get enough of this one. It should have beat Shrek for the first animated feature Oscar ever, but considering how many Oscars Pixar has now compared to DreamWorks, I think it's okay to let this one slide. Yeah, robots! Woo! Bigwell! Hell yeah! Get up off of that thing, and maybe you'll feel better. Robots is such a strange fucking movie to talk about because it feels like it should simultaneously be better and worse than it actually is. I'm not even really sure what I think about it because it has so many unbelievably amazing elements mixed in with typical generic kids movie stuff. Like, this movie has this tremendously profound commentary on how the rich will do anything in their power to make basic human rights like healthcare unobtainable to the lower class and will allow the poor to die out in the street. And then it also has an armpit fart contest. I think with some fine-tuning and further development of the story's anti-capitalist messages, this could have been like the magnum opus of Blue Sky Studios. They're one truly great movie. But like, as is, the messages are there, they're compelling, but the story doesn't really do anything with them. Rodney becomes this icon helping the poor and dismantling the oppressive establishment they all live in. But then the movie drops that because he's gotta go find Bigwell, and they gotta do wacky hijinks at this party, and then there's a chase scene, and like, it's fine, but a little all over the place. They also definitely should have had Cappy meet Rodney way sooner, because as is, it feels like you could tweak the story a bit and remove her entirely. Robin Williams as Fender surprisingly isn't that great or memorable. He has some funny lines and moments, but overall this is probably one of his weaker roles. Okay, that's enough complaining about robots. There's other good stuff, like motherfucking Big Weld! You know how I was kind of like meme praising Yummo Wickersham earlier? Well, that, but unironically, that's how I feel about Big Weld. It's Big Weld. He's so thick. He's voiced by Mel Brooks. Now, watching this as a 7-year-old, I didn't know who that was, but I could tell he was a big deal, and I could also tell the voice acting was really good. This is maybe the funniest joke in all of Blue Sky history.
I'm going in with you.
You are?
Hey, who's the dame with the sweet keister?
But why?
I don't know. I'm a big guy and I like women with large...
No.
Like, dude, that's so good. The misunderstanding elements, the voice acting from both of them, the fact that Big Weld is so upfront about his preference for big booty bitches, that's comedy, baby. How fucking cool is that domino scene, for real? In fact, how fucking cool is this world in general? Like, look at it. It's so imaginative and creative and whimsical, and it looks nothing like our own world. It looks like a place robots would live in. And they actually put some thought into how robots robots age, with them needing new parts and new voice boxes, and it's so cool. Let's be fucking honest with ourselves for a second here. Robots put way more thought into its world building and how the world affected the story than Cars did. And it's just a better movie in general. Like, with Cars, you just have so many questions about how these car people work, and the world literally just looks like our world, but sometimes car themed. You could do the story of the first Cars movie with humans and it wouldn't make much of a difference. Meanwhile, with robots, you actually understand how they work, and the story actually ties into them being robots, and wouldn't make sense if they weren't robots. Just, can we finally acknowledge that Pixar really shat the bed with Cars, and it's only this popular and semi-respected because it has the Pixar name attached to it? Blue Sky deadass outdid Pixar in this respect. Plain and simple. Oh yeah, and the climax is so cool when all the outmodes show up, Avengers Endgame style, to fight Madame Gasket. Ooh, and Madame Gasket, ooh man, what a dastardly villain. And Ratchet's so funny too. The part where Fender kills them all to the Britney Spears song, man, it's so funny. Ooh, and the camera pan, so great. And then the ending, man, to get up off of that thing. Ooh, it's like a fusion of jazz and funk. It's called Junk Comedy Gold. This is so epic. Okay, I changed my mind. You know how I said I don't feel passionately about any Blue Sky movies? Well, this is the one. This is the only one that I feel passionately about. It has its structural problems and many immature jokes, and it drops some of its most compelling story elements halfway through. But man, it's just got so much good shit in it that I love. It genuinely stuck with me over the years. This is a movie with some real love and care behind it, and you can feel that. I can't realistically rank it higher because of its problems. I think the top 3 are just fundamentally stronger movies, but come on, it's robots. It's kind of like how Tick Tick Boom was only number 8 on my best of 2021 list, but it's probably the movie I feel the most passionate about from last year. Imagine not feeling passionate about the movie that gave us Big Weld. Are you even alive if you don't like Big Weld? Come on. If necessary, I will fight Karsten Rundquist for the title of #1 robots enjoyer. Our battle will be legendary.
Hello, Newman.
So, I feel like a lot of you might be dissatisfied with my placements of 3 of what I consider to be the big 4 Spielberg blockbusters. Jaws, E.T., and Raiders of the Lost Ark are probably placed a bit lower on my list than they are for most people. But I'm gonna try and make it up to you by saying that the last of the big 4 Spielberg blockbusters completely lives up to the hype for me. Welcome to Jurassic Park. The first time I watched this movie, I really liked it and thought it was great. But it wasn't until this rewatch when I realized, holy shit, this is kind of phenomenal in every way. Like, more than any other Spielberg movie, I'd argue that this is the one he directs the fuck out of the most. What do I mean by that? I mean there are so many insanely gripping sequences, so many great little details, meaningful and effective shots, just an unbelievable visual mastery over what every scene is trying to convey. And it's not just little moments that make this movie so excellent and so well directed. It's the overall massive tonal shift halfway through that serves as the main conceit of the film. It feels like the entire movie was tonally built around this one line.
That is one big pile of shit.
I think we have the wrong clip. Who's responsible for this? Randy, looking at you.
The entire movie was tonally built around this one line.
Yeah, but your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
An iconic line, no doubt. But I'd go a step further and argue that the whole film revolves around that one sentence. The first half of Jurassic Park is the whether or not they could section, where the characters and the audience are taken in by the whimsy and wonder of living, breathing dinosaurs. He did it. That crazy son of a bitch. He did it. I'm referring to Spielberg, by the way. This is some of the most revolutionary CG in the history of film. It blew audiences away in 1993, and a lot of it still holds up pretty well. A couple shots look iffy now, like, unfortunately, the very first dinosaur they encounter, and the running ones later. But most of the other ones, I mean, that's a damn real Triceratops. I refuse to believe otherwise. The effects are legendary and hold up shockingly well. Better than a lot of modern CG, that's for sure. And again, again, despite some of the concerns the main characters bring up, the first half of the movie is pretty magical. From the awe the characters experience, to the John Williams music, to the segment where a cutesy little DNA cartoon explains the cloning process to us, to the fact that the guy in charge of the park just looks like Santa Claus. Like, that was some really good casting, since it really makes you feel like this is a whimsical guy making dreams come true. Also, I wrote that line before I found out that he actually played Santa Claus in a movie the year after this came out. So that just supports my point even more. Everything seems perfect and magical, even though the main characters have a couple of doubts. Then, ever so slowly, those doubts start to get proven right as things go wrong. And this is where the didn't stop to think if they should aspect takes over the film. We've gone from something whimsical and kid-friendly to a straight-up horror movie. The build-up and payoff of the T-Rex are both sufficiently tense and scary. It feels like what Spielberg was trying to accomplish with Jaws all those years ago, but couldn't due to technical limitations. Even though I had seen this movie before, I was on the edge of my seat during that first T-Rex encounter. It's just unbelievable. Don't even get me started on the raptors. Like, when that bitch started opening a door handle, I just thought, oh, they're screwed. It's such an effective film when it comes to conveying danger, and it doesn't even need dinosaurs to do that. When Laura Dern was about to flip the switch and turn the electric fence on while the kid was on it, I was actively shouting, no, don't do it, at the screen. And then they actually electrocuted him. Like, this movie does not fuck around. But with that said, it has this goofy charm to it that it never loses, even as things get dire. Like when the lawyer is left alone on the toilet as the bathroom collapses around him, or when Newman shit talks the dinosaur to its face, or just everything that comes out of Jeff Goldblum's mouth in this movie. It's comedy gold. And on top of it being thrilling and fun, it's also got so much to say about the morals and ethics of bringing dinosaurs back. It's fascinating to see these scientists philosophize over these creatures and determine that it might not be okay for a species that had its shot to suddenly come back. It's fascinating to see Hammond watch every conceivable thing go wrong and say, oh well, next time I'll get this idea right. His conversation with Laura Dern in this Rainforest Cafe-ass looking place is so interesting. I like how Alan has an arc about learning to take care of kids, but they don't beat you over the head with it. The kids don't suddenly call him dad or anything. It's just a nice background element that happens naturally as they try to survive Jurassic Park. Speaking of the kids, my initial problem on my first viewing was that I found them kind of annoying. But I don't know, they're actually not that bad, and seeing them in danger so often adds a lot of stakes to the story. And I kinda wish Jeff Goldblum was in it a tiny bit more, since he has more riz in this movie than any man who has ever lived. I mean, aside from Newman. However, I guess I should count myself lucky he wasn't in it that much, because we've seen how that goes. Oh well, despite these very minor gripes, this is kind of the perfect blockbuster, if we're being honest. It gives you everything you could possibly want out of a movie. Excitement, suspense, humor, and meaningful commentary on the ethics of some scientific endeavors. It contains a heaping helping of both style and substance, marrying an ingenious script with iconic performances and stellar, committed direction. It's baffling to me that this is the only one of the big four Spielberg blockbusters to not receive a Best Picture nomination. I mean, I totally understand Jaws and Raiders getting nominated, but like, E.T.? Really? But to be fair, that's probably because the Academy was preoccupied with a different Spielberg movie that released in 1993. And also their opinions don't matter, so who cares? Jurassic Park is a towering cinematic achievement. And they should have just stopped at one of these movies. But oh well. One of the more beloved Disney villains is Gaston. But why? Well, he's a living meme, first of all. But instead of having me explain why he's so beloved, let's let Gaston tell you why.
A wrestling match, nobody fights like Gaston.
For this no one is burly and brawny.
As you see, I've got biceps to spare.
The song Gaston is such an atypical villain song, but that's what makes it so great. He's not a villain in the traditional sense, since everyone in the town loves him. This song is just everyone singing about how great he is, which is kind of frightening knowing how much of an irredeemable asshole he is. It's dark and sinister while actively not trying to be dark and sinister. And it's so much fun to boot. I mean, it has 4 dozen eggs.
Plus, it's the only Disney song where the sidekick gets large. I wonder what would happen if Gaston was voiced from Patrick Warburton. Can you imagine?
Here's what I don't get, chum. The Immortal talks about the hardships of growing up poor and dyslexic. He lists all the incredible things that he's done, and yet nowhere in his book does he mention the fact that he's dead.
What are you talking about? He just died.
Huh?
That's what happens, Tick. 1 minute you're alive, you're a hero to the whole world, a hero to me. The next, poof, you're dead.
Oh, come on, chum. You make it sound like it could happen to anybody.
Well, who do you think it happens to?
Well, you know, dead people.
Nope. Jordan Peele's Us was one of my most anticipated movies of 2019. It was not good. I reviewed it way back when, and it's a little better than I gave it credit for, but for the most part, it's just an awkward, unscary, bizarre horror comedy that doesn't live up to the excellence of Get Out. If only 2019 gave me a great movie with an ambiguous genre about the contrast between two families of different socioeconomic statuses, while also having an engaging twist and a profound statement involving underground. Oh yeah, Parasite exists. Yeah, chances are you've heard how amazing this film is. And it is. I think it's a little much that this film overtook The Godfather to be the highest rated film on Letterboxd. I mean, as you can tell by its placement, I don't even think it's the best film of 2019. But with that said, wow, is it phenomenal. Out of all the indie features on my list this year, this is definitely the biggest crowd pleaser. In addition to having a ton of depth and nuance and powerful statements about society, it's honestly just a really fun, thrilling movie. It's barrels of fun. This is the kind of movie that literally anyone can enjoy. Go in as blind as possible, like I did, and have a great time. My only real gripe is that I don't really like the ending. No spoilers, but let's just say I was really disappointed with how a lot of the characters didn't really receive proper or satisfying resolutions. And that's just a me thing. I know that was the point of the movie, but I don't know. Ki Zhang was just such a compelling sociopath that I was really disappointed with what they did with her. But again, this movie is 95% perfect, and my personal gripes don't get in the way of my glowing recommendation. Please see this movie. Guys, I would love to put this film at #1 and prove all the naysayers wrong. I would love to say that this is the best overall package Disney has ever put out and that deserves all the accolades and acclaim in the world. But this movie is a mess. Let's get the bad stuff out of the way. First, a common misconception is that the gargoyles are an annoying trio that are exclusively responsible for the movie's tonal problems. Not true, for two reasons. First, Victor and Laverne are actually pretty okay at being moral guardians and confidants for Quasi to talk to. It's this dumbass George Costanza gargoyle that ruins everything about this concept because he is so annoying and immature and unpleasant, and I can't do this anymore. Let's just move on. Second, this movie is a complete tonal mess even without the help of the gargoyles. It did the fool part all by itself, with some truly embarrassing sequences during Esmeralda's initial escape at the Feast of Fools, and even the final battle. This babyish slapstick is wedged in between some truly emotional and heavy scenes, and it gives me complete and utter whiplash. Also, the goat gets on my nerves, sorry not sorry. But the gargoyles do take the crown for the worst scene in the movie, and probably my least favorite song in Disney history. A Guy Like You is so awful. Every bit the tonal disaster that Fixer Upper is, but it doesn't even have the courtesy of being catchy. It's all about building Quasi's hopes up that he'll get with Esmeralda romantically, and then the very next scene, she's making out with Phoebus. Oops! I guess it's cool to completely crush his spirits. Thanks for that, dicks. But yeah, that's everything I hate about the movie, so let's move on to the good stuff. Everything else. The soundtrack, best in a Disney movie easily, but only after you surgically remove A Guy Like You. It's like the appendix, it's useless, and once it bursts, it kind of kills the entire experience. But the Bells of Notre Dame, best opening of any Disney movie. Yeah, I said it. Hellfire, the best villain song by far. God Help the Outcasts and Out There, gorgeous emotional ballads that show how selfless these two characters can really be. Esmeralda straight up asks for nothing for herself because the liberation of her people is more important. And Quasi just wants one day to live amongst regular people. And he gets his wish for a fleeting moment, only for the crowd to turn on him because they're simple peasant folk who suck. I mean, listen to this guard.
You think he's ugly now? Watch this. Now that's ugly.
What a rude ass simpleton. Wait a minute.
Now that's ugly. Wait a minute. At your service, sir.
What the scallop? Anyway, yeah, the characters are great. I mean, Phoebus is a little boring.
Yes!
But the plights of Quasi and Esmeralda really carry this story a long way. Plus, Frollo is still the best Disney villain. I know I complain that he isn't really as three-dimensional as he appears and that the musical made him more compelling, but goddamn, if this Frollo isn't the most evil-ass motherfucker in the entire Disney pantheon, I don't know who is. He's tremendously fun to watch, and he still has more depth than the typical Disney baddie. There's just so much to love here. The vibrancy of Paris, the epic orchestral chanting, the stunning molding of traditional and CG animation to give Notre Dame its grand feel. After the misstep that was Pocahontas, this truly feels like the next step up in terms of making every Disney movie more grand than the last. It's just brought down a bit by the tonal problems that really didn't have to be there. Like I said previously, I prefer the stage musical. It fixes all these issues and it's a more compelling piece of art. But this movie deserves credit for its ambition, even if not all of it panned out in the end. I really do wish I could rank this higher in good conscience, because the best parts of this movie are straight up the best parts of Disney in general. I respect this movie more than I like it, and I already like it a whole lot. So that's a great deal of respect. And if I were this movie, I'd be pretty proud of that.
All right, Gypsy, where'd you get the money?
What? Oh my! I know you won't disappoint me and Mom.
Northwest Mansion Mystery is an episode so amazing that it almost feels too good for this show. And this show is already one of the best I've ever seen, so you know that's some pretty monumentally high praise. This episode stealthily usurps Into the Bunker status as the most disturbing episode of Gravity Falls, with so much delightfully devilish imagery that I can't fathom the higher-ups at Disney being comfortable with it. But that's good! Fuck them! And like I said earlier, fuck them kids! On top of the excellent horror elements, this episode serves as a really interesting depiction of class warfare. The ghost of a lower-class lumberjack who is used for his labor and then tossed aside by the ultra-rich Northwests is initially defeated by Dipper, who then realizes he was similarly tricked and used by these rich assholes. And when the ghost breaks free to terrorize the manor, he isn't defeated or vanquished. Rather, Pacifica breaks free of her status as a link in the world's worst chain and gives the ghost exactly what he wanted, for the townspeople to be invited to the party. It's such a satisfying resolution to the episode, which also served as an amazing conclusion to Pacifica's redemption arc that started in the Gulf War. I really love stories where children break away from their parents' indoctrination and shitty morals, and it's so compelling to see Pacifica overcome the rotten ideals of her parents. Oh, and I ship Dipsifica, obviously. It's crazy how this episode single-handedly convinced me that they should get together romantically, but yep, I sure am convinced. Masterpiece that I just can't get enough of.
Hey, wait a minute.
He thinks there's romance afoot.
It's time for the moment you've been waiting for!
Am I really gonna rank Shiny over Epiphany? Of course I am! It's Shiny. You have the impeccable vocal performance of Jermaine Clement. You have the exceptionally creative animation direction of Clements and Musker. You have the genius compositions and lyrics of Lin-Manuel Miranda. You have a villain who's so gleefully absurd that he completely hijacks the film itself to deliver this number. He comes this close to eating Moana. He beats the shit out of Maui and proceeds to mock him for having PTSD as he does it. His facial expressions and body language sell every gleefully dark moment. Dude, this is it. Everyone else go home. Nothing else Disney animation has put out in the past 20 years can even hold a candle to the magnificence of this sequence and this song. I could probably talk about this shit for like an hour or something, but nobody wants to see that, so let's move on.
I don't like sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere.
Attack of the Clones soundtrack is shockingly spectacular, and I hate Attack of the Clones. It's my least favorite prequel and second least favorite Star Wars movie overall. But hot damn, this is such an exceptional, varied, emotionally powerful score that it's hard not to get even the tiniest bit invested in what's going on screen. Just the tiniest bit.
I want to agree, when I was a kid, I thought this film was the coolest thing ever. But since revisiting this film as an adult, those scenes about the sand are pretty awkward.
Sounds an awful lot like a dictatorship to me.
Well, if it works.
Having said that, I really love how Williams scored the entire third act. The orchestration, the arrangement, everything about this last third of the film just sounds absolutely amazing. But one of my favorite moments of this film actually comes from this really subtle moment when Anakin's looking for his mother. If you pay attention, we're hearing the Duel of Fates, which at this point we've only heard for Darth Maul. Similarly, we're hearing it while Anakin is riding a speeder bike across Tatooine, which again, if you've been paying attention, is exactly how we're introduced to Darth Maul in Episode 1. It's this great visual and musical reflection that hints us toward Anakin falling to the dark side. But if I have to talk about my favorite part of this film, then really, I can't think of a better theme than the love theme for Anakin and Padme, Across the Stars.
Across the Stars is one of the most gorgeous things I've ever heard. It's used so effectively throughout the film and just builds and builds in intensity as Anakin and Padme's romance grows more intense. Honestly, the best word I have to describe this song is godlike. One of my favorite touches is the Imperial March at the end transitioning to Across the Stars, as the scene cuts from Palpatine's budding empire to the wedding of the forbidden lovers. So damn good. But wait, there's more! The speeder chase sounds totally unique, unlike the more homogenized, bombastic sound of the action in Phantom Menace. It's all thanks to the phenomenal instrumentation. Camino has such an air of mystery surrounding it, and the score accordingly gives off an eerie, mysterious feeling so perfectly. And the reveal of the clones is scored absolutely phenomenally as well. There's so many other great pieces, like the excellent action score accompanying Obi-Wan and Jango's fight, the delightful whimsy when Anakin and Padme roll around in the grass, the subtle use of Imperial March and the Emperor's theme when Anakin talks about killing sand people, and I don't know, the entire third act? Mace Windu's entrance? Super exciting. The moment Yoda and the clones arrive? Awesome. When we hear Across the Stars as Padme falls out of the gunship? I felt that, bro. But my favorite musical moment in the film comes during the Yoda versus Dooku fight. Not only is the choir an incredible dramatic touch, but when Yoda lifts the big pillar thing and saves Obi-Wan and Anakin, we get to hear this. An action-y reworking of Yoda's theme from Empire. It's just so satisfying. Attack of the Clones score is just excellent all around. There's no element I can call weak outside of a couple oddly reused tracks, and that really doesn't bother me that much at all. If there was ever any doubt that John Williams was the best thing about the prequels, let such doubts be quelled by this film. Even as a kid, I knew the songwriters outdid themselves with this one. Ain't Got Rhythm is phenomenal. It tells a mini story through Sherman thinking he's lost the beat, only to realize it never left, and that he's channeling it through common library items. The instrumentals and vocals just build and build into a sensational climax unlike anything else in this show. It's just incredible.
Stop singing or you're fired!
You know, the way people online talk about Sing, you'd think it killed their grandma or something. Yeah, it's bad, but nothing about it really got on my nerves that much. The characters are all pretty cliche archetypes, like the rebellious teenager, the stay-at-home mom, the kid who doesn't want to work as a getaway driver for his crime dad. Wait, what? Anyway, yeah, we've kind of seen all these characters before, but that doesn't stop them from being mildly endearing and sympathetic. I think the vocal performances all work pretty well, and none of the characters are all that annoying. In particular, I think the Matthew McConaughey koala is a charismatic lead who holds a lot of the movie together. The best parts of the movie are the beginning, where it hasn't fully hit you how boring and played out the plot is yet, and the ending, where we get some legitimately pretty good musical performances. My favorite was obviously Taron Egerton performing I'm Still Standing, and look, if this movie had to exist to get him cast as Elton John, then so be it. He does a great job here. Anyway, didn't I say this movie's bad or something? Let's get back to that. Yeah, this movie really drags in the middle, with a ton of boring scenes, and of course the whole liar revealed thing, which isn't as self-indulgent as it could have been, but it's still pretty annoying. And then we gotta have the super sad Hallelujah song, where the characters are alone and about to lose all the good things in their lives. At this point, you're just thinking, get to the musical numbers already so I can turn this off. Speaking of musical numbers, while the ending performances are good, there sure are a lot of excessive pop songs played in quick succession during the audition scene, which is fun. There's also a fart joke that probably takes the title of most pointless fart joke of all time. Like, I genuinely don't know what this fart joke accomplished. It's hard to really describe what makes a fart joke pointless, but if you watch the movie, I think you'll see what I mean. The fact that they're all animals is completely pointless, and they never do any work to flesh out this animal world, because that would require talent that Illumination clearly does not have. Another thing the movie doesn't flesh out is the main characters beyond the basics, and we don't even really get any compelling interactions between them when they're all in this singing competition. Oh yeah, and they just drop the whole singing competition thing by the end anyway, so whatever. It's too hard for the movie to pick a winner. Even though narratively it clearly makes sense for the elephant girl to be the winner. But no, that's too hard, ooh-woo. Finally, the Seth MacFarlane mouse really started to get on my nerves after a while, which I guess makes it funnier that he's canonically dead in the sequel. So, yep, it's a movie. It's pretty bad, but there were nonetheless parts of it I liked, particularly when it served as a teaser for Rocketman. Sorry that I didn't outright despise it, I guess, but don't worry, there's plenty more movies to get through that I did despise.
I can feel time warping!
One consistent thing across Christopher Nolan's filmography is the fact that his movies do not aim to make you cry. Now that's totally fine. His specialty is obviously impressing you with the scope of his visuals and the elaborate ways he uses the concept of time to enhance his plots and the reveals within them. But what if I told you he made a movie that not only accomplished both of those things, but also managed to tell an absolutely devastating story about the power of love, family, and human connection that transcends the boundaries of time and space? I mean, you probably already know about it, right? Interstellar is one of Christopher Nolan's most popular movies, and I've seen a lot of mixed opinions about it through the years. Hell, my own opinion on it was pretty mixed. I saw it when I was 16, and I thought it was good but not great, and I never checked it out again until this ranking. And I don't know what it is about this rewatch, but I was kind of floored almost the whole way through by it. It's pretty much the only Christopher Nolan film where the emotional core takes center stage. He usually uses the connection to and loss of a loved one as a jumping off point for his main character's motivations. The loss of his wife motivates Leonard Shelby. The loss of his life and inability to see his kids motivates Dom Cobb. The loss of Rachel motivates Bruce Wayne to just sit at home for 8 years. 8 fucking years. Bro, are you serious? Who wrote this shit? But while these motivations and tragedies are there, they typically aren't the focus of their films. Interstellar is Nolan's first truly emotion-driven piece. Everything ties back to the relationship between Coop and Murph, separated across time and space. The first act perfectly establishes their connection and the betrayal Murph feels when her father chooses to leave her in order to try and secure a future for her. Oh, and also he has a son. I actually think it's kind of funny how much less he cares about seeing his son again. But it stings every single time Murph expresses how much her dad didn't care about her, or assumes he left her on Earth to die. There's that moment towards the middle that just makes me sob, where Coop watches the video logs of his now grown children, unable to communicate with them because time has literally slipped away from him. And then of course, there's the catharsis of the ending, which I guess if you haven't seen this movie yet, I won't go too deep into, but wow is it worth getting to. The powerful elements of the story, of course, are only one piece of the puzzle here. This also contains what are bar none the best visuals of Christopher Nolan's career. Absolutely vivid and breathtaking images of space. The way they bend and contort in such beautiful ways. I don't think it's a stretch to call this visual poetry. And they pair so nicely with Hans Zimmer's simultaneously elegant and intense score. I was just in awe during numerous sequences throughout this film, and I so thoroughly regret that I didn't see this in IMAX when it came out. I don't like to judge a film by the standards of it needs to be seen in a theater to get the full experience, because like, a film should be good no matter where you watch it. But watching this film at home, I was completely floored by the visuals, so I can only imagine how stunning it would have been on an IMAX screen. For about an hour and a half there, I was pretty much on board with everything going on. The story, the characters, the performances. Hell, Matthew McConaughey gave a better performance in this movie than whatever he won the Oscar for the previous year that should have gone to Leo in Wolf of Wall Street. Everything was pretty much perfect for a while there. But then there's Dr. Mann. This character is where the movie kind of lost me a bit, and I feel like I wouldn't have as many problems with him if he was just named anything else. This is kind of the natural endpoint of some of Nolan's unsubtleties as a filmmaker. Having the guy who represents selfishness and betrayal just be named Man. But on top of that, he's just kind of an underwhelming antagonist. I mean, the guy is just a complete idiot, not thinking of a better way to dispose of Coop, trying to dock anyway even though he doesn't know how. He's just kind of a pathetic roadblock we have to deal with before we get to the actual climax in the Tesseract. And I just feel like a scientist and astronaut like him wouldn't act this dumb. He might have gone insane from being alone for so long, but he seems pretty normal and well adjusted very quickly after they wake him up. So I don't know, I just don't like him that much as a character. A lot of folks take issue with the ending in the Tesseract, and like, yeah, it's not amazing. It kind of takes a pretty big leap in terms of believability, which I know is a weird thing to say about a sci-fi movie, but Nolan telling you, oh yeah, fifth dimensional beings from the future built this thing so Matthew McConaughey could explain the mechanics of a black hole through Morse code in his watch. You really have to trust that these entities you never see are out there divinely intervening to make the plot work. And I suppose I can believe that, but it doesn't necessarily feel as natural as everything else in this film. But I will admit, it might be kind of corny, but I do like the fact that love is the quantifiable thing that allows Coop to reach Murph. I think it kind of ties the themes of the film together, and it's really sweet. I don't know, don't judge me. Interstellar isn't gonna be everybody's cup of tea. I imagine some people don't think its colder sci-fi elements really mesh well with the sentimental human story at its center. A lot of people have compared this film to 2001: A Space Odyssey for obvious reasons. But to me, strictly in terms of tone, it makes me think a lot more of AI artificial intelligence. I can overlook its flaws because at the end of the day, the warm and powerful emotion present amidst such a cold and bleak premise is simply too engaging to ignore. I love Interstellar wholeheartedly, and it took a rewatch to come to that conclusion, to let go of my skepticism and simply allow myself to be taken in by a visual masterwork with a beautiful story of a father and daughter, separated but not apart, working together to save humanity. Simply fantastic in every sense of the word. But you tell Dr. Man he'll never eat lunch on this planet again. Sea Shanty is darn catchy. This is the first true banger of the series in my opinion. Just an absolute delight of a song where everyone gets a chance to sing except Noah for some reason. I like how this one places an emphasis on DJ trying not to sing in order to get eliminated, and yet Noah actually gets away with not singing and remains in the game. What a Chad. There's really nothing to critique with this song. It's quick, it's fun, it keeps up the energy of the song the whole time without any slow parts or breaks. Alejandro produces an accordion out of thin air, or maybe he just always has that accordion on him, it wouldn't surprise me. An overall great time. I just wish it was a little longer.
Die, Jedi gods!
Okay, let's be honest with ourselves. 3PO's entire implementation in Attack of the Clones is just that one gag where his head is on a battle droid body. And honestly, as much as I don't like this movie, I don't know man, that gag kinda does it for me. There's just something about the patented George Lucas silliness that I find undeniably charming when it isn't coming from Jar Jar. Actually, now that I think about it, even Jar Jar is starting to grow on me. I think I might have Stockholm Syndrome, so I'm going home. But getting back on track here, if I'm being totally honest, I would much rather have an unabashedly silly gag with 3PO than just having him in the background with a red arm. Hearing him flagrantly scream, "Die, Jedi dogs!" is so funny. Seeing Kit Fisto grin as he force pushes him down is charming. The lines, "This is such a drag," and "I'm quite beside myself," are so unfunny and terrible that they wrap all the way around and become funny again. Star Wars is fucking corny, and I'm on a strict all-corn diet, so you better believe I'm gonna eat this shit up. Plus, on top of that, this is pretty much the only movie outside of the original trilogy where 3PO and R2 have good chemistry together. How they managed to get that good chemistry, considering they haven't seen each other in 10 years, is a mystery. Like, they never really got a chance to bond that much, but they act the same way here as they do way later on in the timeline, once they've actually been through a lot together. It's kinda weird. But then again, pretty much everything about 3PO is weird in this movie. I always personally found it odd that he just goes with Anakin and Padme on the ship, no questions asked. But Patrick once pointed out that the Lars family probably just let Anakin have 3PO when Shmi was gone, which makes total sense. It was cute when 3PO and R2 were at the wedding at the end. That's a nice detail. Overall, a fun use of 3PO that I weirdly enjoy a lot. George may have gone too far in a few places, but not this one. Not this one. This is where things start getting great. Toph and Katara had never really gotten along that well prior to this episode, so the fact that they get paired up for a chance to bond is such an inspired idea. Katara takes Toph to a DNF in the scene, and even though things go a little awry, what the fuck? The spa day is mostly a success. I just love seeing these two bond over an activity I honestly couldn't have seen either of them enjoying. It's really wholesome. It's also wholesome when they dispose of some bitches who make fun of Toph's makeup. You just love to see it. The ending conversation is what really makes this whole segment though. It's beautiful to see Katara expressing her admiration for Toph despite their differences. I'm just happy these crazy kids are finally getting along. This is an absolutely perfect way to start the episode and the day that takes place within the episode. Great stuff.
We don't deliver, but you do!
Kiki's Delivery Service is one of only 2 Ghibli movies that I already saw before making this ranking, and I sure picked a good one to already see beforehand. This movie has all the charm and whimsy of something like Totoro, but with an actual story for us to follow and get invested in. Well, maybe story isn't the best word. This movie isn't particularly plot-driven so much as it is character-driven. It's all about the burnout you can experience from doing something you love too much because you try to make it your job. Kiki's struggle in this movie to rediscover what she loved about flying in the first place is such a relatable conflict, and I connected with it immensely. Same with going out into the world on your own and trying to make it. It's a movie that's great for kids, but I think it hits even harder for young adults who maybe don't quite know their place in the world yet. On top of how identifiable of a movie it is, it's just fun. It's funny, it's whimsical, it's magical, the characters are all memorable and enjoyable. I mean, aside from Tambo, he's kind of weird and creepy. But otherwise, this movie is amazing. It's one of the first things I think about when the name Ghibli comes up, because it represents so many of the studio's best qualities. It's delightful and great for kids while also being really valuable for older people. It's got so many memorable moments and sequences. I think Kiki and Ursula's relationship is one of the best in all of Ghibli. Part of me feels like this movie didn't need a big epic blimp crash climax, but it still fits in pretty well, I think, and it's a good conclusion. In case you couldn't tell, I adore this movie and I highly recommend it.
What the hell is wrong with you? We're a family!
Hey guys, I know this might sound crazy, but I think Encanto might be a good movie. You know how I just said I took a ton of self-reflection before I could write the Moana part? The same applies to this movie. I really had to dig down deep and ask myself if I could admit this, given how much I propped Moana up as modern Disney's greatest achievement to date. But I've come to a new conclusion, and I really can't believe I'm saying this, but Encanto is better. You'd think after an entire year with this movie, the hype would wear down and I consider it more flawed than I previously did. But no, honestly, I just love this movie more and more the more times I watch it. Yes, it is indeed flawed. I constantly think about tweeting, if Encanto's so good, why is Bruno's rap part so bad? Before stopping myself from tweeting that, since some people might not think it's a joke and that I don't like the movie. But seriously though, not only is Bruno's rap part bad, but like, why does nobody apologize to him? Why the fuck did Dolores not say anything about him still being there? And also, maybe some of the characters could be better fleshed out. Like you could explore Isabella more, or have more negative interactions between Alma and Mirabel to strengthen the main conflict of the story. I don't know, parts of it could be better, sure. But honestly, I don't even care. I don't care. This movie is just so legitimately excellent in so many ways. The songs are consistently fantastic, except for the opening one. I don't really care for that one that much still. But the others are so good. Not just incredibly catchy and effective musically, but they advance the story and characters, and they easily have the most creative presentation out of any of the 3D Disney musicals. Moana started to get there with You're Welcome and Shiny, before Encanto ran wild with the creativity of how it animated and presented its songs. Absolutely incredible. It's also consistently funny with a ton of memorable characters, both inside the family and out. I swear to God, Fish Lady has more personality than every single character in Pocahontas. And the way the story is more so an excuse for character revelation, for Mirabel to discover the cracks in her family and how to fix them. To me, that's so much more interesting than having her go on some physical grand journey. It's strikingly different for a Disney film, but it makes for such an effective and nuanced conflict. Alma isn't some nefarious villain, but she is legitimately harmful to her family's well-being, and the film acknowledges that. Her reconciliation with Mirabel is so powerful and one of my favorite scenes in any Disney film. Again, I have an analysis video on why it works and why the reconciliation in Raya doesn't at all. Speaking of which, I have spoken in the past on wanting to make a ton of analysis videos on this film, or perhaps just making one big one in the same vein as my Ratatouille video. However, I kinda lost motivation for it in the wake of corporate Disney's blatant homophobia in early 2022. Much like Dana Terrace said in a tweet, I wasn't really in the mood to make Disney look good. Plus, the way the Best Animated Feature Oscar felt so rigged in Encanto's favor didn't really encourage me to want to heap further praise on it. But I think I'm almost ready to revisit the idea of giving this movie and its beautiful themes, messages, and characters the long-ass analysis vid they deserve. I don't know, it still might take me a while, because my first huge project of next year should probably be the long-awaited autopsy on the Dear Evan Hansen movie I keep putting off. So I will talk about Encanto more later. Plus, I've already talked about it in the past if you want to watch those videos. Bottom line is, my third eye is opened, and I accept how thoroughly this movie slaps. Feel free to call it mid-Kanto all you want, but my opinion will not change. This is genuinely the best Disney film since the Disney Renaissance, and I hope we get more like it in the future.
It's the Revenge of the Sith!
I feel like Revenge of the Sith scroll has to be the most divisive, love it or hate it one out of the 9. And I'm gonna be honest, I was about to say that I'm a little bit mixed on it, but the more I look at it, the more I realize it's honestly really good in spite of some flaws. Dare I say, it's pretty iconic in a bombastic and exciting way to open a film. If you perceive the previous prequel paragraphs as pretentious and poorly plotted, please peruse this pleasantly pronounced, powerful prose. War! The Republic is crumbling under attacks by the ruthless Sith Lord, Count Dooku. Not only is that a perfect bridge between the ending of the previous film and this one, but considering how large in scale the battle was in Attack of the Clones, it's incredibly easy to picture Dooku and his minions doing some real damage to the Republic. Plus, the words used to describe these events are vivid and expressive. Crumbling, ruthless, stunning, fiendish, besieged. George got a ton of great use out of his word-a-day calendar. It's some solid stuff. Yeah, opening up with war is a bit silly, especially considering this is already a series called Star Wars, like the war is implied. But it doesn't take me out of the crawl nearly as much as the dead speak. It's a little corny, but it's fine. A lot of people tend to take issue with there are heroes on both sides, finding it confusing because there aren't any heroes on the Separatist side. But like, from their perspective, yeah, Count Dooku and General Grievous would be heroes fighting for what the Separatists believe in. It's meant to foreshadow later lines in the movie, like Palpatine saying good is a point of view, or Anakin saying from my point of view the Jedi are evil. I feel like it's a very clever and misunderstood line that speaks to one of the movie's key themes. And I love how it became the name of a Clone Wars episode that actually showed some of the legitimately good people on the Separatist side. Evil is everywhere also complements the line nicely, since not only is the evil Palpatine leading both sides, but the Republic and Separatists are both considered evil from the other side's perspective.
From my point of view, the Jedi are evil!
Yeah, we got it, thanks. The first paragraph is really, really good, but the second one has a bit of Rise of Skywalker-itis. We're told that the fiendish droid leader, General Grievous, has kidnapped Chancellor Palpatine. Wow, that's an extremely significant event that we're just letting you know about through text. Granted, it's not as bad as Piece of Shit Walker, obviously. It's acceptable to just let us know that Palpatine is already kidnapped, but it's still a bit jarring. Especially because this is literally the first time we've ever heard of General Grievous. So we not only have to process the fact that this new character with a fairly silly name that we've never met before is the droid leader, apparently, but also that he managed to kidnap the Chancellor. Yeah, I don't know, it just kind of feels like part of the story is missing here. You are able to watch the cool-ass 2D Clone Wars show to see the kidnapping yourself, which is better than a fucking Fortnite event. But even so, this isn't the most natural way to convey this event happening. Not a big deal though. And yeah, the final paragraph is pretty simple, but an effective way to prime you for the opening action scene. I love how they don't even need to say who the two Jedi Knights leading the desperate mission are. They know that you know exactly who they are.
This is where the fun begins.
Overall, yeah, I honestly think this crawl is pretty strong. It's got some of my favorite prose out of all of them, and it evokes the feeling of an old-timey war newsreel incredibly well. It suffers a bit by dropping information that would have been cooler to see unfold in the actual movie, but that's not really the crawl's fault. If we can't change the movie itself, this is probably one of the best ways the information we need to know could have been conveyed through text. And yeah, it is a tad corny, but it fits the wartime aesthetic. honestly, yeah, this one's good. I'm still not sure if the movie it came from is good, or if I just like it because of the memes and the Clone Wars, but I can at least confirm that the opening text at the beginning of the movie is good. You're welcome, prequel fans. I reviewed Soul last month, and I will review it further in the Pixar ranking, so I won't say too much here, but overall, it gets better the more I think about it. It offers so much for the viewer to unpack and begs to be discussed and analyzed, which for a modern Pixar film is a miracle. This is the first time in years that I'm actually excited for a Pixar movie to win Best Animated Feature. I hope this gets a Best Picture nomination. Hell, it honestly deserves a Best Director nomination, even though it won't get one.
When you're not really fun.
This has gotta be Pixar's best directed film ever. And while it's still held back a bit by parts of its script, it's just a really great film that deserves the attention and accolades it's getting. It feels good to see Pixar hit a home run again.
Fantastic. Mr. Fox!
So, I take it Fantastic Mr. Fox is the movie that most of the people watching this video are most familiar with. Being an adaptation of a popular Roald Dahl children's book, Wes's only adaptation to date, in fact, this is a movie that's known and quite beloved by average moviegoers and cinephiles alike. And for good reason. This movie fucking rocks. It's fantastic. Mr. Fox 2009. It somehow perfectly captures the whimsy of the original book and marries it to Wes's typical idiosyncrasies, making for one of the most fulfilling and impressive adaptations I've ever seen. Stop motion animation was always a natural step for such a meticulous filmmaker to take, and he nailed it on his first outing, giving us stunning sets, unique character designs, perfectly framed shots, the whole shebang. This is probably the orangest movie ever made, but you know what? It makes a great case for why that not super loved color is actually really damn gorgeous. The cast is also put to great use here, like Willem Dafoe as a nefarious southern rat. God, I love cinema. Jason Schwartzman does a great job as Mr. Fox's belittled and neglected son. Seriously, this character and his relationship with his dad is just Chicken Little but good. Wes actually got his brother, who cameoed in a lot of his previous films, to play a main role here as Christopherson, and he killed it. He's a natural fit for Wes's dialogue and tone. Obviously, I guess. And for the leads, Wes stepped outside his actor comfort zone and brought in George Clooney and Meryl Streep as Mr. and Mrs. Fox. Both are so great. Clooney especially, who is so charismatic as this sly master thief, trying his best to go straight and stop Breaking Bad. Seriously, Mr. Fox somehow simultaneously gives off Walter White and Saul Goodman vibes. And that fact alone somehow makes me love this movie even more. I mean, I'm not crazy, right? He can't stop slipping and pulling scams just like Jimmy, and he did it for him rather than his family like Walter. Am I wrong? Okay, there's other good things in this movie. The writing is very dry and witty, the villains are threatening, the stakes are high, the score is unbelievably excellent, but it's the little details that really make this movie for me. Like, look at the digging animation these animals have. Look at how funny that looks. Look at how when they tunnel into each one of these 3 safe houses, they have the exact same dance animation every time. I am being charmed to heaven and back by the way this movie is animated. Ooh, what about when he's hiding behind the cider and the score is like do 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 do, or when the dogs and the farmer eat the sleepy blueberries and their eyes just get asterisks in them, or just the fucking shots of the possum staring blankly with swirls in his eyes. I am just obsessed with all of the tiny touches that add up and make this film so visually distinct from anything else I've ever seen. Isle of Dogs looks slightly better, yes, but I feel like there's just so many more visual flourishes to obsess over in Fantastic Mr. Fox. Is there anything that holds this movie back for me? Well, I guess I'd say that this doesn't really have my favorite characters out of any Wes Anderson movie. They're good, especially Mr. Fox, his possum buddy, and the goddamn Willem Dafoe rat. But none of them are quite as compelling as, say, Max from Rushmore or the Tenenbaums. Whenever I think about this movie, I think about how it looks. I think about the jokes and the score and the fucking swirly eyes on the possum. It's still good character-wise, but not the greatest. And it is kinda raw that Mrs. Fox never gets to do anything in the climax. I know Wes isn't exactly a paragon of writing female characters, but like, come on, give her something. But hey, this movie has a great story, great music, great humor, great animation style. It's just great. Oh no, I should have said fantastic for all those things. What was I thinking? This movie has a fantastic story, fantastic music. Never mind, the moment's past. Whatever. Bottom line is, I am one of the biggest proponents of the Fantastic Mr. Fox agenda. I will maintain for the rest of time that it deserved Best Animated Feature and a Best Picture nomination far more than Up. Like, okay, Up can keep Best Score, fine. But does Up have a swirly-eyed fucking possum in it? Checkmate, liberals. What?
You saying I'm stupid?
A Bug's Life is not exactly ranking very highly on a list of any kind. Unless it's a Pixar villain one, in which case, yeah, they were onto something here. Hopper is undoubtedly the highlight of the film for me. The heroes are fine, but it's one of those movies where the villain really steals the show. He only shows up in 2 scenes during the first hour, and yet his shadow lingers over all of it. The entire plot revolves around the dread of his imminent return after he demands double the usual amount of food. And said dread is really enhanced by what a great first impression he makes. He's just effortlessly intimidating while also being charismatic in a crooked and sinister sort of way. A lot of this comes from his creepy design and rough skin texture. Though, rather unfortunately, I do have to say that it's Kevin Spacey's vocal performance that really makes this character as great a villain as he is. I guess it's pretty fitting since Kevin Spacey is evil in real life. But yeah, so many of this character's lines are just dripping with malice. I've also always loved the scene where he uses grains as a metaphor to prove the might of hundreds of ants. He makes his point quite vividly by pretty much murdering these dudes right in front of all the others. It really effectively establishes why he's in charge and why everyone continues to follow his orders. But mainly, Hopper makes for such a great villain because he's the textbook definition of an oppressor. No other Pixar villain uproots the life of an entire group like this. Nor does any other Pixar villain feel quite as significant to the film's overall message. Fight back. Rise up against oppression. The moral wouldn't feel nearly as potent if the villain wasn't so effectively evil. But thankfully, he is. Oh, and his interactions with his brother are comedy gold. That's good too. Leroy and Stitch is a pretty solid send-off to a TV show I never actually watched. I feel like I'd obviously get a lot more out of this movie if I had seen the show, but it works pretty well as a standalone regardless. The pacing is a lot snappier than Stitch the movie, there's some solid emotion with the aliens wanting to move on with their lives and say goodbye, Gantu has a solid redemption arc, and that climax with all the experiments fighting all the Leroys? Yeah, endgame wishes. I think it's a pretty solid last hurrah for the Lilo and Stitch franchise. Nothing mind-blowing, but definitely an engaging watch. I wish I had more to say about it compared to the other movies on this list, but yeah, it's pretty clear that this is a TV show finale that just gets lumped in with all the other direct-to-DVD sequels for some reason. Not sure why, but by direct-to-DVD sequel standards, it's definitely one of the best ones. Licorice Pizza is a movie that features neither licorice nor pizza, and that makes me angry. I spent the whole movie entirely hungry for the promised pizza, and instead all I got was an incredibly charming, funny, well-filmed, well-paced romantic comedy with 2 unbelievably talented lead actors. This is fucking bullshit. But like, the movie was fantastic. What do I think about the controversial age gap in this movie? The movie is very smart in maintaining ambiguity about the nature of their relationship throughout most of the movie, which keeps the story from feeling uncomfortable. And movies are not supposed to be a perfect reflection of real-world morality. If you are 25 IRL, don't date a 15-year-old or I am calling Chris Hansen on you, it's that simple. If you don't want to fuck with this movie, that's totally fine. I just thought the characters' ages were crucial to their arcs and personalities, and they handled it as well as they could have. Until the ending, which I really don't like, plus it's very abrupt, and it's my biggest problem, but the rest of the movie is fantastic. Go watch it. If this somehow loses best screenplay to some bullshit like Don't Look Up, then I'll become the Joker again!
Barbra Streisand?
Barbra Streisand.
Sand,
yeah, like sands.
You tell Arthur Reed that he'll never eat lunch in this town again.
Arthur Christmas is the only kids movie I've ever seen that references the Cuban Missile Crisis, and that's how you know it's good. This might just be my favorite Aardman film out of all of them. It's a really creative, funny, and heartwarming take on Santa Claus lore. I think it's really neat how this movie establishes that the title of Santa is passed down from father to son over generations, starting with the original Saint Nick. I like how the different Santas have conflicts over tradition versus new technology, and what the best way to deliver presents is. I love how the current Santa isn't portrayed as perfect. They don't shy away from his character flaws, and it's great to see him overcome them. I really really love how the brother in this movie seems poised to be a twist villain who wants to forcibly take the role of Santa for himself. And then he isn't that. He's just a real person with a real internal conflict who goes through a character arc and realizes he doesn't deserve the title he aspired to get for so long as much as Arthur does. Wait a minute, that's literally just what I said Prince Charming's arc should have been in Shrek the Third. Like, they're both named Arthur. What? Huh. Wow, I guess Aardman do what DreamWorks don't. Ironic. Overall, this is a really strong, touching, clever holiday film. It's got good emotional moments, well-realized characters with strong arcs, a pretty good animation style that's very distinct from Aardman's other works, and a ton of incredibly strong jokes that really caught me off guard. Not every joke in this lands, but the ones that do really land. This is a great underrated movie that you should definitely check out this holiday season. What are you really gonna get out of a 37th rewatch of Rudolph when you got gems like this going completely unnoticed? Check it out, baby. The real opening number of the movie, f*** all that diamond nonsense, an explosion of good vibes all around. It's exhilarating to finally see our gem buddies at peace and reflecting on how far they've come. Pearl's part is the best, obviously, but every part just comes together into a phenomenal opener. Also, it's way better than that song from Frozen 2, which is ostensibly the same exact song, so suck it, Disney.
It's not people, it's animals.
California animals.
Zootopia is kinda sorta starting to lose me a little bit as time goes on. The more I rewatch it, the less impressed I am with the commentary it presents regarding race. The intentions are certainly good, but the subtlety is just not there. Nearly every conversation any character has in the first 30 minutes of this movie is somehow race-related or talking about stereotypes, and it's just so constant that it starts to feel disingenuous. Like these characters aren't characters, they're just mouthpieces for the movie's messages, which are certainly good messages in theory, but would have been better presented in a more subtle and nuanced way. Show, don't tell. That scene where the rabbit mom brings her daughter closer when a tiger's next to them on the train is still the most powerful scene in the movie, because it's subtle. The rest of the movie seems obsessed with broadcasting its message right in your face throughout the whole thing, but its effectiveness is dampened because it's trying to connect real-world racism issues to prey and predator animals, despite that connection not really making much sense. Previously, I praised this movie for advocating against stereotypes and racism in general without really making any one-to-one connections with the real world, but the more I analyze this movie, the more I realize that it clearly wants to say something about the real world. It clearly wants to say something that its characters and world just aren't capable of, because equating predator animals to actual people is really fucked, and I shouldn't have to point that out, Disney. It's really uncomfortable, especially considering how much of the movie's plot hinges on it. So the movie's message and allegory elements have kind of fallen apart for me under scrutiny, but even with that said, this is still one of Disney's better movies throughout the 2010s. It has its fair share of funny moments, and Nick and Judy are charming characters with great chemistry. Once the adventure gets going, they stop hammering the well-intentioned but misguided message into the ground, and then the investigation is fun. I like the little rodent town chase scene and the Godfather reference. There are drug dealers in this movie named Walter and Jesse, which is actually kind of amazing. Hey yo, Mr. White, I'm in Zootopia, bitch! The Shakira song is still terrible, the donut-loving cop is kinda lame.
Did he just say, aye, he did?
I really hate the nudist colony scene. It's just... no, please stop. The sheep is still so funny to me. I can't believe they even thought this was a good idea for a twist villain. Embarrassing.
Actually,
I'll kidnap 1,000 children before I let this company die.
And then the movie's over. It's just kind of decent, I guess. It's losing me rapidly, and maybe it won't be so decent the more time passes. But at least it's not a smug subversion of the Disney formula that thinks it's smarter than it is. That's a plus, I guess. Licorice Pizza is a movie that features neither licorice nor pizza, and that makes me angry. I spent the whole movie entirely hungry for the promised pizza, and instead all I got was an incredibly charming, funny, well-filmed, well-paced romantic comedy with two unbelievably talented lead actors. This is fucking bullshit. But like, the movie was fantastic. What do I think about the controversial age gap in this movie? The movie is very smart in maintaining ambiguity about the nature of their relationship throughout most of the movie, which keeps the story from feeling uncomfortable. And movies are not supposed to to be a perfect reflection of real-world morality. If you are 25 IRL, don't date a 15-year-old or I am calling Chris Hansen on you. It's that simple. If you don't want to fuck with this movie, that's totally fine. I just thought the characters' ages were crucial to their arcs and personalities, and they handled it as well as they could have. Until the ending, which I really don't like, plus it's very abrupt, and it's my biggest problem, but the rest of the movie is fantastic. Go watch it. If this somehow loses best screenplay to some bullshit like Don't Look Up, then I'll become the Joker again.
Barbra Streisand?
Barbra Streisand.
Sand.
Yeah, like sands.
I'm gonna kick your ass!
Kung Fu Panda is awesomeness incarnate. It is so much awesomeness crammed into a single movie. I honestly can't believe how well it works. It's a really great depiction of imposter syndrome and trying to live up to impossible standards imposed upon you. But at the same time, it's remarkable to watch Poe's perseverance and passion shine through, in spite of everyone telling him to quit. The philosophies offered by Master Oogway are really thought-provoking and interesting. The internal conflict Shifu grapples with over whether to trust his master's judgment or not is great. The pain Tai Lung had to endure after being told he was destined for greatness is really compelling. All the characters are instantly relatable and identifiable, which makes the drama in this film surprisingly strong. And that drama is channeled into some truly breathtaking, intense, well choreographed, amazingly done fight sequences. From the prison escape to the bridge battle to Tai Lung and Shifu's climactic final duel, every new action sequence ups the intensity and dramatic stakes considerably, culminating in a more laid-back and humorous final battle that beautifully illustrates Poe's unorthodox fighting style. Tai Lung probably could have beaten Poe if they turned stage hazards and items off, but the fact that it's believable that a novice like Poe can defeat Tai Lung using the attributes and abilities that make him special, rather than by trying to be someone he's not, is a really powerful message. It's stunning how a movie this conceptually goofy can tell such a profound, exciting story that adheres to Chinese philosophies and culture so well. It's simply amazing. Yeah, I really do need to make videos on these movies, don't I? Alright, time to break out the tier list. You got the good movies, you got the really good movies, and then you got the masterpieces. If you haven't watched these, shame on you. And then you get the big boys. These movies are some of my all-time favorites. They are the reason I love animation and film as a medium. So let's get it started. Ratatouille is an absolute delight of a film. This is hands down the most underrated Pixar movie of all time. Every scene and location is dripping with atmosphere, from the cold isolation of a sewer to the sensory cornucopia of a food cellar. Nearly every frame of this movie expresses such an exquisite feeling of wonder and joy. But aside from the atmosphere, this movie just feels the most sophisticated out of Pixar's entire catalog. It genuinely feels like a smart indie movie made for adults, from the pacing to the dialogue to the humor. That's the magic of Brad Bird's writing. His Pixar movies, even the weaker one, have dialogue that feel like they were written specifically for adults, but can still be followed and enjoyed by children. Most Pixar movies, as good as they are, feel like they were written primarily for kids, with adults also being able to enjoy them. This movie is the inverse. It fully immerses itself in the language of cooking, the rich beauty of Paris, the nature and deconstruction of criticism, and the importance of following your dreams. It seems like a simple message, but the way this movie develops it and represents this theme through multiple characters is just fantastic. This movie has story structure problems. I mean, Remy doesn't talk for a solid 30 minutes in the movie, and maybe one or two subplots could have been cut to tighten the script a bit. But at the end of the day, I don't even care. This movie absolutely soars due to a wonderfully realized world, great characters, a rich, mature story, and some of my favorite scenes in any film, let alone animated film. I have a soft spot for Persepolis, but of course Ratatouille deserved its Oscar. It's a masterwork that Pixar has not topped since, and I hope more people really start giving it the respect it deserves. It's such an incredible experience, and you should watch it right after this video is over. The Banshees of Inisherin is the most aggressively Irish thing I've ever seen. But you know what? I gotta respect that. Anyway, this movie is about two friends who split apart after the one friend decides he doesn't want to be friends anymore. It simultaneously manages to be an intensely bitter and sad film, while also having a great deal of strong comedy and absurdity to it. The tonal balance is struck in such a masterful way, and I was constantly either on the verge of tears or admiring just how silly this goofy little dude is as he tries and fails to get back with the guy who's pretty much his only friend. It's a film with a simple story that nonetheless manages to ask a ton of compelling questions about the nature of relationships and loneliness and what the best way to spend your limited time on Earth is. It's as deeply profound as it is surprisingly entertaining.
You're seeing things.
Kung Fu Panda is a series with some ruthless, compelling, immensely intimidating villains and also Kai. Out of the trilogy, the fan favorite definitely seems to be Lord Shen. This maniacal peacock is responsible for the genocide of the entire panda species, save for a handful of survivors. Po's mother is sadly killed during Order 66, and Po is taken in by Best Dad, aka Mr. the Goose. But Po never fully recovers from the trauma of losing his mother at such a young age. So while he has to physically grapple with Lord Shen and his big-ass cannon of doom, he must also conquer the emotional scars Shen left all those years ago. It's a really profound story, amplified by the fact that Shen is without a doubt the most evil creature DreamWorks has ever created. His hasty mass genocide of an entire species, brought about by paranoia surrounding a prophecy that he had no reason to even believe, is sickeningly vile. His devious voice and unique design contribute to an intensely memorable and worthy foe that emotionally and physically wrecks Po more than anyone else. And yet, Po's scars heal.
No, they don't.
Or, I guess his wounds heal and the scars fade or something?
I don't care what scars do.
Now, Lord Shen is an obvious contender for #1 on lists like these, so what's he doing here? Well, truth be told, I don't like some of the comedy bits with him. The funny lines that he says aren't the problem, it's the way he's rendered a bit pathetic now and then by some of his minions or the soothsayer.
I see pain. Ow! And anger.
How dare you!
And I'm honestly not quite as intimidated by him as I am with some of the other villains. Still, he's honestly a near perfect villain. I mean, I ranked Shiny at #4 on my villain song list, so clearly I have a tremendous amount of respect for the #4 spot, and it's nothing to sneeze at. So yeah, don't at me about this. Sadly, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse did not come in 6th place, even though, as I said in my top 10 games ranking, that would have been a fun coincidence. It was just too damn good. Yeah, not much to say here really. I reviewed this already, and honestly, you know why this movie's amazing. I don't need to sell you on it, dumbass. I will say that in spite of the spectacular piece of art that it ended up being, they probably could have made it this good without Phil Lord's incessant micromanaging and the insane amount of crunch the animators went through. I really hope all these stories coming out about this movie's absurd production will prevent the 3rd movie from turning into the same behind-the-scenes nightmare. Shout out to all the amazing animators who made this movie happen, and shout out to Phil Lord for being cringe. This actually isn't in the script, but did you guys know that in 2021 when Encanto and Mitchell's and the Machines were up for animated feature, I made a tweet that was like, boy, it sure is a shame that like the Mitchell's guys are so passionate and they're gonna lose to Encanto anyway. Phil Lord liked my tweet, and then, like, the next day, I saw that Phil Lord actually blocked me. It's like he liked that, but he didn't read it all the way through, and he wasn't supposed to like it or something, so, I don't know. I just find that very funny. Nowadays, he blocks everyone who posts a link about how he treated the animators, but I just wanted to say that I have a badge of honor of getting blocked by him 2 years earlier. Woo! Okay, that is all. Back to the ranking. #4, baby, we got Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. Not what anyone expected, but I think that's a great thing. Because the more I thought about what the show was advertised as, the more I realized, wait, so we're just gonna watch the same cast do the same story again? Obviously with more time to tell the full story of the comic, and being animated is always a plus. But yeah, it just kinda seemed like a typical reboot, even though the hype was still there, of course. And then it takes a hard left turn at the end of the first episode and becomes a completely new story that's able to flesh out characters like the Evil X's, who barely got any screen time originally, and pair characters together that you wouldn't expect. It enriches the Scott Pilgrim universe so much, and shows just how strong all these side characters are, since they can hold their own even without Scott around. More than anything, it just serves as the perfect antidote to our modern reboot and remake culture, forcing the audience to consider, hey, do you really want to see the same story again? Or do you want to see something brand new that makes you appreciate that original story even more? Imagine if a Disney live-action remake, for instance, took a hard left turn and completely changed its plot. Like, seriously, imagine that, because I can't. This was such a bold decision that most studios making remakes would never do, because it's not as profitable or whatever. But man, does it add something to Scott Pilgrim and the world as a whole. Some of my favorite bits were the Gideon and Matthew Patel fight. Hell, Matthew Patel in general, he was so much improved from the original story. Young Neil was also so much funnier than he's ever been, and one of the standouts of the show. I like the stuff with Ramona and Roxy. Pretty much everything Wallace did was incredible. I wasn't very impressed with Kieran Culkin's voice acting when I heard it in the trailers, and I still think all those takes sounded kinda weak, but in the show he was a lot better, so I apologize. He initially sounded more uncomfortable in the recording booth than dry and disinterested, but as the episodes went on, I stopped noticing that issue. He did a great job. I kinda wish the twins got something to do, because they didn't in the movie, and they still didn't in this, but oh well. I like the Gideon and Julie stuff, the last 2 episodes were great, and yeah, I could ramble about this more, but I'll leave you with, it's fantastic, watch the movie first, and then check this out. Man, I gotta read the graphic novel sometime, how have I not yet?
Fantastic. Mr. Fox!
So, I take it Fantastic Mr. Fox is the movie that most of the people watching this video are most familiar with. Being an adaptation of a popular Roald Dahl children's book, Wes's only adaptation to date, in fact, this is a movie that's known and quite beloved by average moviegoers and cinephiles alike. And for good reason. This movie fucking rocks. It's fantastic. Mr. Fox 2009. It somehow perfectly captures the whimsy of the original book and marries it to Wes's typical idiosyncrasies, making for one of the most fulfilling and impressive adaptations I've ever seen. Stop motion animation was always a natural step for such a meticulous filmmaker to take, and he nailed it on his first outing, giving us stunning sets, unique character designs, perfectly framed shots, the whole shebang. This is probably the orangest movie ever made, but you know what? It makes a great case for why that not super loved color is actually really damn gorgeous. The cast is also put to great use here, like Willem Dafoe as a nefarious southern rat. God, I love cinema. Jason Schwartzman does a great job as Mr. Fox's belittled and neglected son. Seriously, this character and his relationship with his dad is just Chicken Little but good. Wes actually got his brother, who cameoed in a lot of his previous films, to play a main role here as Christopherson, and he killed it. He's a natural fit for Wes's dialogue and tone. Obviously, I guess. And for the leads, Wes stepped outside his actor comfort zone and brought in George Clooney and Meryl Streep as Mr. and Mrs. Fox. Both are so great. Clooney especially, who is so charismatic as this sly master thief, trying his best to go straight and stop Breaking Bad. Seriously, Mr. Fox somehow simultaneously gives off Walter White and Saul Goodman vibes, and that fact alone somehow makes me love this movie even more. I mean, I'm not crazy, right? He can't stop slipping and pulling scams just like Jimmy, and he did it for him rather than his family like Walter. Am I wrong? Okay, there's other good things in this movie. The writing is very dry and witty, the villains are threatening, the stakes are high, the score is unbelievably excellent, but it's the little details that really make this movie for me. Like, look at the digging animation these animals have. Look at how funny that looks. Look at how when they tunnel into each one of these 3 safe houses, they have the exact same dance animation every time. I am being charmed to heaven and back by the way this movie is animated. Ooh, what about when he's hiding behind the cider and the score is like do 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 do, or when the dogs and the farmer eat the sleepy blueberries and their eyes just get asterisks in them, or just the fucking shots of the possum staring blankly with swirls in his eyes. I am just obsessed with all of the tiny touches that add up and make this film so visually distinct from anything else I've ever seen. Isle of Dogs looks slightly better, yes, but I feel like there's just so many more visual flourishes to obsess over in Fantastic Mr. Fox. Is there anything that holds this movie back for me? Well, I guess I'd say that this doesn't really have my favorite characters out of any Wes Anderson movie. They're good, especially Mr. Fox, his possum buddy, and the goddamn Willem Dafoe rat. But none of them are quite as compelling as, say, Max from Rushmore or the Tenenbaums. Whenever I think about this movie, I think about how it looks. I think about the jokes and the score and the fucking swirly eyes on the possum. It's still good character-wise, but not the greatest. And it is kinda raw that Mrs. Fox never gets to do anything in the climax. I know Wes isn't exactly a paragon of writing female characters, but like, come on, give her something. But hey, this movie has a great story, great music, great humor, great animation style. It's just great. Oh no, I should have said fantastic for all those things. What was I thinking? This movie has a fantastic story, fantastic music. Never mind, the moment's past. Whatever. Bottom line is, I am one of the biggest proponents of the Fantastic Mr. Fox agenda. I will maintain for the rest of time that it deserved Best Animated Feature and a Best Picture nomination far more than Up. Like, okay, Up can keep Best Score, fine. But does Up have a swirly-eyed fucking possum in it? Checkmate, liberals. Wait.